Awesome. Tough act to follow. They always tell you don't follow a cute child. I'm going to add a corollary. Don't follow an annoyed academic. Tough to follow that act. First, I did talk to several people who attended the joint session, including some former students, although I didn't talk to President Snyder. And they said two things that was consistent amongst the 5 people that I spoke to. One was that it was electric. Better than a State of the Union, with the possible exception of Obama's first State of the Union, that everybody was excited, etc. Second, how nonpartisan it was and how it actually gave hope to people, including members of Congress, of being able to work together. That it was a very different vibe that you were picking up in Washington, D.C. compared to the previous 10 years or so. So let me make a couple of comments about the text and then a little bit of research about how Catholics think about some of this thing from some of the surveys that we've done and end there. Number one, I loved when the Pope said, "I say this to you as the son of immigrants, knowing that so many of you are also descendant from immigrants." And then when he talked about the continent, what he's doing there is he's talking about that the immigrant experience in America is not unique, that American exceptionalism, which we always talk about as a nation of immigrants, constantly irritates Latin Americans who are all nations of immigrants, especially Argentina, which is probably, it is something like 98% of European stock. So he comes from a true nation of immigrants, just like America, but also trying to, in a sense, create a sense that the Western Hemisphere has been safe from many of the major issues facing the world, and that we need to act as one and also kind of bring in that unity. That's number one. Number two, he says, which is very interesting, he says, those first, talking about immigrants here in America, those first contacts were often turbulent and violent, but it's difficult to judge the past by the criteria of the present. I'm thinking Father Serra, a justification for Father Serra. And here comes one of his, I think, major contradictions in his speech, because 2 paragraphs later he says, when talking about immigration reform, that if the Congress doesn't act or do anything, that the yardstick we use for others will be the yardstick which time will use for us. But not for Father Serra, I guess. So it's a very interesting contradiction there. Another quick comment. When he states, when countries which have been at odds resume the path of dialogue, a dialogue which may have been interrupted for the most legitimate of reasons, new opportunities open up for all. He's talking about Iran and Cuba. And of course, he was central to the Cuban-American dialogue. He then goes on to say, this has required and requires courage and daring, which is not the same as irresponsibility. Here, he's talking about Obama, but never mentions his name, or at least that's my interpretation. A good political leader is one who, with the interest of all in mind, seizes the moment in the spirit of openness and pragmatism. A good political leader always opts to initiate processes rather than possessing spaces. Obama is what he's talking about with the opening to Iran and to Cuba, my interpretation of his text. Fourth, he talks about not necessarily gun control, but the arms trade. And here he really is uniquely talking to America in Congress. We are the #1 exporters of arms. 95% of Mexicans killed in Mexico because of the drug war are killed by American arms. It is against the law in Mexico to own guns. All the guns are illegal, and they all immigrate illegally from the United States to Mexico. It is the worst aspect of American society. We are indifferent about it. We protect guns, and we tell Mexicans that's not our problem. And therefore, and then we get irritated when the Mexican government, according to some that I think Father Dick referenced, are irritated with Mexican officials that don't respond to the immigrants coming up here. But we are incredibly irresponsive when it comes to the arms trade. One of the things about a State of the Union processes, you often have seen a State of the Union where President Obama or President Bush are speaking, and they will say something, and half the audience stands up and claps, right? And that's the Republicans or the Democrats, and then the other half on something else. And that actually happened twice, not that they stood up. It happened first, and it was a brilliant work of words and how he did it. He mentions, I'm sorry, I lost my space here with that quote. Well, basically he says, we need to protect life at all stages, okay? He's talking about abortion, obviously. You have heard some people clap. He then immediately talks about the death penalty. You heard the other half clap. Then it happened again when he speaks about business being a noble profession, and then immediately talks about climate change. And so you saw that was the only two times where you really saw that division. By the way, there was also a scene right there where people were clapping, but you saw the 4 Supreme Court justices not clapping, okay? Just for, they are not, it's tradition for the Supreme Court justices not to clap when there's a joint session. They don't want to be seen as being partisan or what have you. And it is interesting that there were only 4 of the 7. It's also interesting in terms of talking about the Pope and Catholics that the Supreme Court is now majority Catholic, when for most of our political history there was not even one Catholic on the Supreme Court. Let me skip that because I'm running out of time. So let me give you some very quick nuggets about the survey. The Loyola Marymount University conducts the largest general social survey in the region. Not USC, not UCLA, Loyola Marymount University. We interview over 2,400 respondents every January. Because it is the largest survey done in Los Angeles, it is also the largest survey of Catholics in Los Angeles. Okay? And so, and then in comparing Catholics to the general population, when we asked, let me give you 2 or 3 about immigration. Recently, the state passed a law that allows undocumented immigrants to receive driver's licenses. Do you agree or disagree with this new law? Overall, 73% agree with that. Catholics, 84%. As a major part of Obama's policy change will allow some immigrants who are in the U.S. illegally to stay here temporarily and apply for a work permit if they have children who are in the U.S. And it goes on to describe further the plans. It says, do you think these plans go too far, does not go far enough, or about right? And here, Catholics and the overall are about the same, where 49% think it's about right. And then I can go on about the differences between Catholics and non-Catholics in Los Angeles. The bottom line is that on this issue, and I have all kinds of data also on climate change and on a variety of different other issues, you can see that Catholics are a little bit more progressive than the rest of Los Angeles. However, when you disaggregate it by ethnicity and take Latino Catholics out of the mix, white Catholics are more conservative than Los Angeles, okay? And it's Latinos here who make Catholics more progressive and more in line with the Pope. I think I'll stop.